So the Division 2 and the Division 1 were two games that really did break the mold of the third person genre for me. The very first time I saw the Division was when they announced the beta. Ubisoft had just come out and say, "Oh, there was going to be a beta for the game." I didn't necessarily follow the game like a lot of people did. Some people have been following the Division since its first announcement in E3 of something, something, something. Now, when I saw this, I thought to myself, well, I like third person games, and many of you do like third person games, but I wasn't necessarily sure if I liked third person shooters or dedicated third person shooters. So, again, this was one of those things where I just had to make up my mind and say, okay, well, I guess I'm probably going to go with this particular, game and see what's going on. So I played the beta. And I thought, man, this is actually so much fun. I was delighted to have played the beta for Tom Clancy's The Division 1, and I enjoyed it. But here's the crazy thing. After playing the beta, I didn't buy the game. I went ahead and bought Battlefield 4 thinking, maybe I'm probably going to prefer this game. And it kind of still hit me like, hey, this is not your type of game, number one. And number two, when you think about it, I wasn't really a big shooter fan. So I decided, okay, let me go back to this random game. This was almost a month later that I played the beta for. And I went on eBay, and by that time, the Division 1 was getting a lot of flack. And at this point, I said to myself, maybe I can get myself a used copy. And I did get myself a used copy. It was actually so much, fun to pay $33 for a game that was barely a month old. And eventually I realized, oh my goodness, I actually do like this particular shooter because it has some aspects to it. The third person genre is a very interesting genre because with it, we've been able to see a lot of different games come to light. I think the big appeal for the third person genre is the fact that, you as the player, you're playing from this perspective where you get to, see the character in a different light. You get to see the enemies in a different light. And I think this really does, call for you as the player to be able to experience the world and take in the world in a very different way. This way, also in a co-op game is also pretty cool because you not only can see your player character from the camera that's set behind them in the game development world, you can see other people's player characters. It's almost like a weird, an interesting setup overall in the way that things are done. And if at any point one day I would ever, make a video game, I would love for it to be a third person game. I think that's probably, in my opinion, what really, stands out with this genre. The FPS genre is also pretty good, no doubt about that. But I think the Division's third person approach really did make it unique, really did make it stand out in, the gaming scene. Destiny 2 is one of these games that does, implement both in some instances. And I thought to myself, well, okay, I played a little bit of Destiny, but it was first person, and I'm not really too fond of many first person games. I'll play story driven ones. I'll play some that have, some fun elements that were able to basically, in a sense, appeal to me. Far Cry, you'll see it in my library. You'll see Metro in my library. Metro Exodus is the one game that I really did enjoy. Try to play the old Metro games, but, after playing Exodus, you're like, oh, okay, I think I already got a whole set of the story. But coming back to the Division, I think this is basically the one, major selling point of the game because you get to experience the world in a very interesting way. I think another thing, too, with Ubisoft Massive, and if you were actually kind of seeing, how this has taken place, is they made Division 1 and Division 2 third person, but when they decided to make Avatar, they decided to go with the first person paradigm. I think that really hurt that game title because they are very, very, in my opinion anyways, unique in the way they take their world approach. They built a beautiful world in Avatar. They built a very detailed, almost realistic world in the Division 1 and 2. In fact, the Division 1 was almost a replica of the areas of New York. It wasn't one-to-one, but in the case of the Division 2, the areas of Washington, D.C. that are represented in this game are pretty much one-to-one in terms of scale that they actually implemented in the game. This was reported, at the time the Division 2 was first revealed and unveiled. So I think the strength of the Division from a genre perspective really does hinge, on this particular, paradigm. And looking at the Division 3, we have, almost as much certainty as we can muster anyways without hearing anything more, about the Division 3 that it's going to continue this particular tradition, and I hope Ubisoft Massive will continue the third-person tradition. Even their Star Wars game, is getting a third-person outlook now. As to how that's going to appeal, Star Wars fans, y'all are going to have to, determine how you're going to deal with that game. I like Star Wars to an extent, but I'm a Jedi, person. I like the Jedi stories. That's kind of where, a lot of my, affinity is. I like the fact that they're somewhat warriors with some kind of, philosophy that they kind of talk about and all that stuff. You know how it is, and it's just interesting. I mean, it's not like, I'm some big, huge aficionado of the aspect of the franchise. In fact, if anything, I prefer the animated series, the Clone Wars, and the way they're able to talk about different stories within their little world and the galaxy there. That really, for me, was the heavy hitter. But when all things, basically stand aside, I think one of the strong points of the Division games, but whether it be, the Division 1, whether it be Division 2, are, in my opinion, really, really cool aspects that really resonate to the third-person genre, and the way the character can experience the open world, the way the character is able to experience the game, all of the different aspects, to me, it really makes a lot of sense. And as a shooter, man, that I don't know, that feeling of aiming down sights, that feeling of being able to use your skills and your equipment, like your shield, be able to place things in really cool places. A lot really does hang on it. When you kind of consider and you think about it very carefully, you'll realize that, man, this is actually, a very, very interesting way to build a game, But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody can actually, ignore how pivotal this particular system of games are, and how it's basically made the Division what it is. Because if there was another game that would have actually competed with the Division, it was going to be Anthem. It came out a month before. It was also a third-person game, but it never did last. There was no longevity with it. And I think that would have created a very solid competition, because that also took the whole third-person traversal to a whole different level. While the Division is a grounded game, no doubt about that, it's still, is a solid title in my opinion. And from a design perspective, I think the developers made the very right choice to go with this particular paradigm. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for engaging in a discussion. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another video. Appreciate you guys for watching. Peace out.